Welcome to the Vision for Life podcast, an ongoing conversation between the pastors of Fellowship Denver and the church at large. Each week we talk about life, faith, the Bible, and how to follow Jesus as we go about our daily lives. I'm Autumn, host of the Vision for Life podcast. The basis for everything we discuss here is God's revelation of himself to us. God's revelation surrounds us, and his revelation of himself brings wisdom and clarity to those who lack the ability to see. It provides us with a unique spiritual light that allows us to see things we couldn't previously, unaided by God's word and by God's spirit. And I'm joined today by Clark and Andy. I'm going to introduce you guys because our listeners may not know exactly who you are. Clark, you've been around Fellowship for a long time, but recently joined our staff as the pastor of community and mission for our North Metro congregation. Mm-hmm. Welcome.
That's right. Yep. It was 10 years ago that I first sat in a chair at Fellowship Denver, and then they hired me 9 years later after many conversations.
Yes. Well, we're so glad you're here. And I said you're one of our pastors for our North Metro congregation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right.
You can explain that a little bit.
We decided as we moved into this building on the kind of southern side of the city that many of our folks on the north side it was a little bit of a harder time to invite some of our neighbors to church. So we decided we probably wanted to start a new congregation on that side of the city to kind of see some of our DNA and some of the same things that we were doing kind of take grip in that part of the city.
Mm. And there are a group of people who are committed to helping launch that congregation.
Yeah, that's right.
And so you're working right now on a bunch of the logistics and on the ministerial side of it, meeting with people, doing a bunch of groundwork.
Yep, it's been a lot of networking, meeting with tons of people who are just not connected to church, meeting a little bit with the people that do attend fellowship, just trying to do all the research and find out all the information that we can before we get that congregation launched.
I'm going to throw this in here, but if any of you are really interested in talking to Clark about the North Metro congregation, he would love to connect with you. So you can shoot him an email. His email address is clark@fellowshipdenver.org. So if you're curious about that specific work that is going on, he'd love to hear from you.
It's a great plug. Thanks.
And Andy, welcome.
Thank you.
We're so glad you're here with us. Andy is a recently hired pastor of community and mission for our South Broadway location. And Andy is in process of moving here now.
It's been a long process.
Andy, can you tell us just a bit about your family?
Yeah. So I've been married to Caitlin for just over 15 years now, and we have spent the entirety of our married life in Louisville, Kentucky. We helped plant Fellowship Church of Louisville 15 years ago, just shortly after Fellowship Denver was planted, and I was on staff there for the last 12 years. I started as the worship pastor. They thought I wasn't good enough, so they transitioned. Just kidding. They transitioned me to community pastor, and then for the last 8 years, I've been the lead pastor. And but yeah, we're sensing over the last couple of years that we were desiring to move a little closer to family. My wife and I are both from Wyoming, so we just began praying about what kind of opportunity there might be, and we started talking to Hunter. And yeah, it's been a 1.5-year process of conversations, just discerning the Lord's will. And
that actually is a great entry point into fellowship. You know, this is the process a lot of times. It takes a long time to do things here sometimes.
Yeah. So, but yeah, we're excited to be here. I have 4 kids. I have a daughter named Emmy. She's 11. A son named Drew. He turns 9 on Saturday. A daughter named Jancy. She's 7. And then Georgia Ruth is our youngest at 4. So, but we're just delighted to be here. We're in the home stretch. I start September 1st, and I can't wait.
So we're also so glad you're here.
Thank
and
you.
Thanks for joining us today for this discussion on the podcast. We're in a sermon series right now that is asking some questions, particularly because we're in this stage of the pandemic in which a lot of life picked up really quickly. So for a while, over a year, So many of our normal life rhythms were interrupted by COVID, by the necessity of being separate and not gathering in large groups. And while we are still in the pandemic, we are in a different phase of it now. And we have an opportunity to ask what that was common in our lives prior to the pandemic could we let go of? What should we add back in? And what can we be thoughtful about in scheduling our time, in asking what are we giving our time and ourselves to? And so our pastors thought it wise to address this with our whole congregation and to ask those questions, not only on an individual level, but on a corporate level for all of us together. So during August, on August 1st, Hunter led us through a topic, prioritize gathered worship. And then August 8th, we talked about prioritizing the next generation, not just in terms of age, but the next spiritual generation. And Clark, you preached this past Sunday on prioritizing gospel fellowship. And so I'm going to hand this off to you. Could you summarize that topic for us, what you covered in the sermon? Many of our listeners will have already listened to that. But as a way to start our discussion today, do you help us get our heads around that topic?
Totally. So we're kind of just calling this idea of gospel fellowship is just the gathering of Christians together for the benefit of each other, and really just with the end goal of drawing near to God in the end. So our text that we went through is Hebrews 10, 19 through 25. And this is a text that really is just giving a big reminder to the readers that there's a brand new just option, an opportunity for community that exists that's based on the work of Jesus. Even in this text, you can read through it and you can see how many times the author refers to them in a plurality. It's not to an individual, but just as a group of believers that are all doing something kind of together. And I think the most special thing about it, and really the thing that makes this so unique, is that there's no just like requirement to get into this community. The whole time that the author's talking about it, we don't get a single reference to something that somebody needs to do, but it's all based just solely on the work of Jesus. And that, like, in belief in Jesus, we're getting free access to God with each other, which the sermon talks a lot about, like, why that is actually just a really bizarre idea. And it's something that's often lost kind of just like on our Western ears. But to them, that was an incredibly just radical thing to say, like free access to God. When they all had.
So you're saying because of Jesus' work, we, in this passage, we both have free access to God, and we are brought into this sort of community. So we're immediately also connected to one another.
Totally. Yeah, that's exactly right. It is, when you read this, there's like no option for this to just kind of be done individually. While maybe it's an individual decision to enter into that community and believe in Jesus, as soon as that happens, you already start getting a vision for the church, how people as Christians should operate with each other and how they relate to each other right after that. So, but I think one of the most interesting things about this text is that just like us, Autumn, as you were kind of mentioning, we've had our normal patterns just disrupted. And the original audience of this letter did as well. As they were kind of, first starting to proclaim faith in their culture, they experienced a ton of persecution. People were losing their jobs, they were losing their homes, they were losing social status, being put in jail. And it was really causing them to kind of sink back from the faith to kind of protect themselves. And for us, it was we had a really similar kind of experience. Maybe it wasn't like social persecution, but we had to, for like our safety, go and hide in our basements to like not interact with people. And we can now kind of like, we actually have objective evidence and data around the damage that this has just caused to people, both in the church and out of the church. It really fits kind of our cultural moment really well.
Okay, so in what way, Clark, you just said that this actually, you see some relevance from this passage in Hebrews that sheds a particular light on a cultural condition or common cultural experience that we are sharing right
Totally.
now.
Yeah.
Can you expound on that a little bit?
Well, the back half of this text is really like the author comes in and gives us a vision for this new community and what it looks like and what it's based on and what the foundation is. But then the text ends with three things that Christians need to do together to like protect and preserve that, which are stirring each other up, meeting together, and then encouraging one another. The Hebrew audience was in the same boat, and that they actually couldn't do those things when they were kind of sinking back into isolation. And for us, when we were pushed into isolation, kind of from like what's happening in our culture and our world right now, it also removed the possibility for us to do those things as well. So it's really easy to kind of see how both for the Hebrew audience and for us, we kind of opened a door to spiritual trauma in a sense, to not be able to do life together in the way that we were called to.
And that what you're saying is that resulted in not only just actual loneliness, maybe that people were experiencing, but a sort of spiritual loneliness or dividedness.
Totally, yeah. And it's like we even talked in the sermon about the kind of evidence that's existing in the world right now, and it's just really evident to see the damage that's caused, both physically and spiritually. And like the Christian faith was not something that we were ever supposed to do totally alone. So you can just see how that one led to another.
And in your sermon on Sunday, you cited some sources when you say physical and spiritual kind of damage that we have experienced because of this dividedness, because of the actual separation that we had to go through during COVID for the safety of our larger society. You cited some studies and some statistics about how the repercussions that we're seeing and experiencing.
Yeah. And they weren't very encouraging. Like, it's not like, it doesn't look good. And really it's like, I think one of the most fascinating things is that you can kind of like look around the world right now, especially in the Western culture. And like, if you can point to something that you're like, that's actually not good, the new data is actually suggesting that it's probably loneliness that caused that in the first place. It's been the isolation of people that has led to like the radicalization. It's led to the polarization. It's led to all of these major problems. They're kind of like all saying the common denominator in all of this is loneliness, which is fascinating. Like that the Christian faith works the exact like same way. We've had this information that we're supposed to live together.
The really cool thing about Christian community as we're thinking about this idea of all the cultural forces that have been putting pressure on us, that have isolated us and led to greater degrees of loneliness, as we're thinking about, I mean, even our world sees that this is destructive to human flourishing and that deep connection is needed. But as Christians, we actually have we don't have to manufacture that connection. That is something that is actually given to us as a gift of the gospel. This whole passage, it's interesting. It ends with this call to not neglect meeting together and, to gather, to stir one another up. But it begins talking about how we have this free access to God through Christ. Therefore, brothers, since we have confidence to enter the holy places by the blood of Jesus, by the new and living way that he opened for us through the curtain, that is through his flesh. In other words, what the author of Hebrews is saying is we've been brought into this new and living relationship with God through Christ, whose blood was shed for us. And because of that, we're now family. And what do families do? They relate, they live life together. I mean, you even think about the way that we enter into the Christian faith. In America, sadly, we've turned the Christian faith into such an individual experience. My personal relationship with Jesus, which it's true, we do have that. But think about the way we enter. We enter the Christian faith through this weird rite called baptism, where we stand with the body of Christ and we are immersed into water and brought out of water. But think about what's happening to us. We're being baptized by the church into the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. right? So it's as if we're being immersed into this new family, this new identity. We go down into the water and die to our old self, and we're raised to this new life where God is our Father, Christ our Savior is our older brother, as the author of Hebrews says in chapter 2, and the Spirit, Paul says, I think in Romans 8, the Spirit is given to us and bears witness with our spirit that we're children of God, and so cries out within us, Abba, Father. So we're immersed into this new family. That's how we start the Christian life. God is our Father. Christ is our older brother. The Spirit is the spirit of adoption. And if that's all true, what does that make us? It makes us family, makes us brothers and sisters. And that's the basis upon which we enter into this Christian community. Sorry.
Yeah. I love that. That's like the idea of family is so important. Like, you just don't, like, no matter what my kids do, they're like still my kids, you know? And that's a great just kind of metaphor for what this community looks like. And that's like, what a relief and like pressure that takes off of us when we can kind of fully understand that. It actually creates some safety to be who we really are and open ourselves up, in a community to work on refinement, to see where to grow, open ourselves up for encouragement. And also we have the safety to like offer that to others as well.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what, I mean, community, deep connection and community and friendship is really built around safety and trust.
Yeah.
If somebody feels like they constantly have to perform to be accepted or loved, and they can't come as they are, which is broken and inconsistent and struggling. And I mean, those are just, that's part of our fallen condition. If somebody feels like they have to come and put a mask on, that's not going to build trust. But you know, one thing, like I've said to my kids, I do this all the time with them, and they probably think it's weird, but I will, like, they're getting big enough to where I can't do this anymore. You know, I can't like hold them like I used to. But I will just hold one of my kids, and I'll just look them in the eye, and I'll just say, will Daddy ever stop loving you? Is there anything you could ever do to make me stop loving you? Because I just want them to know, like, they are my family no matter what. Yeah. But it's that sort of love, and this is, all that is a picture of the gospel, right? Yeah. And it's that sort of like love that invites people into real community. Totally. Man, I can come when I'm broken, and Clark is going to receive me where I am. He's going to extend grace. He's going to walk with me.
Totally. I think that's something that's so often forgotten too for us. We, like, at least for me, I will often think about God that way. I will think about my kids that way, or my wife that way. And I think they'll think that way about me. But I sometimes forget that that's actually the vision for community as well. Just by like being in the body of Christ, that's actually how we treat each other. And it seems that maybe that's a growth edge for us, to lean into that and know that that's actually how we treat each other and respond to each other as Christians as well.
Yeah. Amen.
So there is this entry into the family that has nothing to do with our own merit, that is based on the work of Jesus. But then it is participatory. So when you're in the family and part of the family, these challenges that are given to us in this passage in Hebrews that were extended to the congregation there, to the family of God there, receiving this letter, and to us as the family of God here at Fellowship Denver, the challenges that you mentioned, Clark, to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglect meeting together, and to encourage each other. Those are the ways then in which we participate in that family. And that is actually what results in the kind of environment that you're talking about, in which someone can come and be invited into deeper relationship and friendship into this family, because we're practicing those things. Putting those things actually into work and participating in the family in that way.
Totally. I love that there's just never a focus in those on the things that we did wrong or like our deficits. It's just on talking about what your potential is as a Christian and like getting each other there. It's like, I just love that.
So I'm listening to this discussion, even just what both of you shared, and that sort of family sounds great. I think that sounds like what many people want. And Clark, you mentioned our cultural condition, not only of loneliness, but spiritual loneliness and dividedness. And probably many people listening to this would say, well, yeah, that is the sort of relationship that I desire. But there are certain implications then within this discussion if we actually begin to put this into practice. So let's take, for instance, just the gathering together and even the topic of the sermon, prioritize gospel fellowship. There are certain structures that our church has and encourages. One, certain rhythms that we maintain. One of those is Sunday morning worship. That is what Hunter was talking about, and prioritize gathered worship, the coming together to, as the family of God, learn and express praise to God, to recognize his work in and through us. That's a part of our weekly rhythm. And then another structure that the church puts in place are small groups, what we call fellowship groups, which are small to medium communities who meet together to discuss God's word, to ask how this applies to life, and then just to get to know each other. And so I think when I hear gospel fellowship, and then I think about the structures that our church actually puts into place, my mind goes to gospel fellowship is getting together with people who are a part of our local church family. And the way that we encourage that specifically as a church is through these small groups or fellowship groups. Is that a right line of thinking?
Totally. Yeah.
So if I were just sitting, listening to this, to your sermon on Sunday, or to this discussion, and desiring this sort of relationship, and then the kind of structure that the church promotes, that it encourages, which we're encouraging right now. Right now we're in a season of telling people to sign up for fellowship groups, for a fellowship group, because this is an expression of life together, and of these, it's a way that these specific challenges that are issued to us in this passage in Hebrews get lived out, and that we can implement these and start to practice them in our lives. So if I'm listening to this, though, I immediately start to think of reasons either that this might be difficult to do in practice, even though it sounds great. And even though this is the result I would love in my life, it sometimes can sound to me like, okay, here are the things that you do. You go to church on Sunday morning, you join a fellowship group, and then you're going to have this amazing community and these sorts of relationships that are welcoming you into a family in which you can come as you are, you can be vulnerable, you will be received as a valued part of this community, regardless of the state in which you come. That all sounds great. And I think that is the vision, but there are some practical difficulties to doing that and to actually experiencing that sort of life within the family of God. So I'm going to just ask you guys some questions that I know I've had conversations with people who have these questions. I sometimes have them myself. So we're going to now just shift into sort of a question and response and discuss some of the practical implications of practicing gospel fellowship in our lives. And one of those that Andy mentioned and that we were discussing as we were preparing for this episode is just sometimes our stage of life makes this really difficult. So Andy mentioned he has 4 young children. Clark, you have 2 kids. I have 3 kids. I think we've all experienced that sometimes your efforts to get together with people who are in your local church family, whether that's in a structure like fellowship group or it's just getting together with other people who you want to get to know, to share life with, can be complicated by the stage of life that you're in. One of those being parenting. So the question is, what if my stage of life or my schedule just makes this really difficult? Either of you can weigh in, or both of you can weigh in.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So I think the first maybe thing that we just have to acknowledge is there will always be difficulties in any aspect of following Christ. There's never this perfect runway that makes following Christ easy in every way. You know, we all have different challenges and struggles, life circumstances. that could apply to any number of areas of our walk with Christ. And so it's no different when we think about living in intentional Christian community. There's going to be challenges that come with different stages of life. I remember when I was younger, I was blessed to be able to go to college, but I was single throughout college. I had hundreds of hours to spend with my friends. And it's just amazing to this day, 20 years later, I can't believe it's been 20 years. Those are some of my closest friends to this day because my life stage allowed me to spend countless hours with them. But then I had this really weird thing happen as I got a job and then found a spouse and had children and life got busy. I realized it takes a lot more time and energy to build deep connection like I had then. And what I've noticed, I don't even know if I'm answering your question, but I'm pontificating here. What I've noticed is, that's our word for the day. Being in pastoral ministry for a long time, I've noticed that a lot of people, as they step into new life stages, they become a little bit disoriented with Christian community because it's not as easy as it used to be. There's these life challenges. So many times as I've pastored, for many years I pastored a younger church, a lot of people right out of college, kind of in their mid-20s to mid-30s. And it was very predictable. The folks coming right out of college in those maybe 4 to 5 years afterwards were often struggling with community. They were finding this is not as easy as it used to be. There must be something wrong. But the truth is that's just they were entering into a new life stage. And so I think that maybe what I would say to that issue is as we find ourselves in a different life stage, like I've got 4 kids and I'm probably going to get some amens here on the podcast, but there have been a lot of times where being part of a fellowship group or small group, we called them gospel community groups because we just wanted to go over the top, but I felt like, what's the point of this? I just drag my kids to this fellowship group and everybody else drags their kids and we're in this house that's way too small for all of us and the kids are just being crazy loud and we eat some snacks and we try to have some kind of sermon discussion or Bible study or prayer, but we're just all so distracted. And then we end the night and go home.
And now we're just parenting in front of each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's real community.
Yeah. So I've described the challenge, maybe we could talk for a second about what do you do? Mm-hmm. Because it's a real issue. And if you have no categories for how to navigate that, I think a lot of people's default is, well, what's the point of this? Mm-hmm. I'd rather just sit on my back porch and listen to a worship song or something by myself. So where do we go from there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's something to be said about just these different seasons all kind of bring in their own sense of chaos. And it's you kind of have to just embrace that and know that I think you hit the nail on the head when you said just because it doesn't feel the same as it did before, we'll often interpret that as lesser than or a failure of, and that's not necessarily the case. Just by a really clear example of that is for us, we at one point had 22 children in our fellowship group, and it was I don't know how to even describe the pandemonium that existed there. But there was something really special that happened when our kids all got to watch their parents get together and attempt it. That's you're not only having adult community happen in that sense. Now kids are asking questions around, what are y'all doing? Like, what is this? Why do people actually come over to our house every Tuesday night? And then they're interested in it and they're intrigued by it. And that's an immense benefit to even just like get to start those conversations. So I want to like just encourage us not to think about it as a thing that's lesser than because it changes, kind of like exactly what you said. That's a really just good word.
Yeah. And I think if I could, address, just maybe cast a little vision for, what do you do when you encounter that kind of roadblock where you're in a life stage where fellowship group just feels hard and you're wondering if it's worth the investment? I think this is where it's really important for us to have a basic vision for maybe how groups are structured, but to really equip and empower our group leaders to think contextually about their specific group. Yeah. So like going back to my example, so like I've been in a group just like that where we had a lot of kids and we were meeting at our house, which was not well suited for that. Now there were other groups in the church who had that many kids, but they were meeting at houses that were much larger, that had big basements with like separation of spaces. And it was much more feasible for them to have an edifying group in a situation like that. But we found like we just felt like we were beating our head against the wall. And so as a group leader, I'm like, well, okay, I could sort of stick with the kind of the structure, the traditional structure that I've been given, or I could think, our goal here isn't the structure. Our goal is gospel fellowship. Mm-hmm. And so in our specific group, we had to think strategically, and we actually we had to develop rhythms where guys were meeting on like Monday mornings at 6, and then women were able to meet on a Wednesday night while the guys watched kids or what, we just, the point is, those obstacles are only a barrier if you're married to a specific structure and you're unwilling to be creative. Mm-hmm. If you're willing to be creative and prayerfully ask the Lord, like, if you're calling us to this, there is a way for us to do this. We believe that in faith. Lord, show us in our context how to do that. And I mean, that's just wisdom. That's just wisdom in life, is living contextually as a follower of Christ.
Yeah.
So perhaps one of the specific, just simplified responses then to my stage of life makes this difficult is that you'll probably encounter various types of difficulty, be it actual external difficulty vis-a-vis your children and everyone else's, or some difficulty emotionally, like you were mentioning with someone who has experienced a really specific type of community in a college context or in a school context and then is moving into a different stage of life. So the simplistic answer, to which you all gave us a more expanded explanation and thought process, but the simplistic answer is don't just stop there. Don't just say, my stage of life makes this difficult, and so I can't do it right now. Consider some creative options, or consider perhaps that you might be assigning a value to it, like you were saying, Clark, that it isn't as good because it feels different. Yeah. Another common thought process within this whole discussion, or even a common experience that we, particularly as church leadership, really have to wrestle with and love people well in, because I think it is a common experience within church, is that we do put structures in place like Sunday mornings and fellowship groups, and someone who attends may actually willingly take that on, and they may have certainly a desire for the sort of relationship that you've been describing in our discussion today. So the thought process can go something like this, like the church tells us we should attend, or I know it's a good thing to do to attend regularly. I see that biblical pattern, and so I'm doing that. I'm attending regularly. And then within the structures of the church extends this challenge to us to join a small group, join a fellowship group. So I'll do that too. It seems like a good thing. And I do want to meet people. And I do want this sort of deeper connection with people in my church family, in my local church. So I'm going to do that too. But then what if I do all those things and I'm still struggling to find what feels like genuine friendship in which I am actually welcomed, or I do feel like I can come and be vulnerable, and as we've used the terminology here, just sort of come as I am, knowing that I'm coming on the merits of Jesus' work on my behalf. So what if someone goes through these steps that we've laid out or engages in these sorts of rhythms and is still struggling to find the sort of connection that we've described?
It's a really great question. The first thing I would want to say is that this text gives us a reminder of the way that we're supposed to do community. And we get this is a funny way to say it, but we get a reminder because we need a reminder. Like this probably actually isn't natural for us. Like the way that we are often influenced about the way that we should relate to each other is not this idea to like meet to be able to stir one another up to love and good works and to encourage each other. That is countercultural to the way that we relate to each other, especially in our differences. This vision for community kind of like pulls the rug out from underneath that and says that that's how it's supposed to happen. So not only do we need reminders like today for that, is like for how that community is supposed to work, but like we'll continue to need them. The people that are leading our communities will also need them, and the people that are part of our communities will also need that reminder as well. So it's not something that just like you hear it once and it goes away. So part of me says like I'm not actually surprised to hear that the communities don't always work that way, or like there is sometimes even trauma caused by them. But what we can do is like just lean on this text and use that as a guide to how to make those communities better, whether or not we're leading them or a part of them or just exploring them.
Yeah, I think that's a really good word. These are hard. These are such difficult questions because it is heartbreaking a lot of times when you do the things that you believe God is calling you to do, and after all of that, you still feel lonely and disconnected. I mean, this is why books like Ecclesiastes exist in the Bible. Like the book of Proverbs is essentially like, if you do this, generally this will happen. If you do this, generally this will happen. Like it's kind of like the bread and butter of biblical wisdom. But then Ecclesiastes comes crashing in and says, yeah, but it doesn't always happen that way. Sometimes you can do this. Like you can be wise and build all this wealth in your life, and then you die and a fool inherits it and he squanders it all. Right? And so but the point is not that we're left hopeless. The point though is that it is a reminder that we do live in a fallen world, and so there's no formula, as we were talking about earlier, where it is automatically guaranteed. If I do this will be the for sure result every time. And so I think maybe that's just a good thing for all of us to keep in mind, to temper our expectations. It doesn't mean it will never happen, but it does mean that sometimes there are seasons of life, whether it's pressing into community or whether it's, think about child rearing. There's that proverb that says, raise a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it. Well, sometimes you do that, and your child does grow up and depart from that. And I think this is the way the Bible is making us wise to live in a fallen world, is to say, sometimes I really invest in community, and for whatever reason, I'm not feeling a deep connection at this point. That doesn't mean community is not the place you should be investing. It doesn't mean you shouldn't be giving yourself to the family of God. I mean, there are times as a parent when I'm doing the things God calls me to do with my kids, and like nothing's happening, you know, they're the same old rebellious kid they were, you know, 2 months ago. That doesn't mean I should stop as a parent doing those things.
Clearly this isn't working. So let's just stop.
Let's just stop it, you know? So, I just kind of wanted to throw that in there because, you know, a lot of our heartache in life, like, because it's a real sadness, and the thing is, I'm not offering some solution here, but it's a real sadness when you feel disconnected and lonely, even after you've done the right things, but your heartache is doubled if you don't have the biblical wisdom to know that sometimes that's part of living in a fallen world. And so your heartache is doubled because you think, I'm doing all this and God's just letting me down, or, you know. And that's a hard place to be as we try to really live in community.
Yeah.
There's something there inherent in that, too, about our expectations because of the way we communicate this as a church. Because as an institution, we always will have structures that support what happens within that organization and institution. And because we're a church, those are uniquely gathered spaces like our Sunday mornings and smaller groups in which we hope that deeper connection happens because you are able to talk to people, to see them face to face, to interact with them personally. And because of that, I think it can sound formulaic. Do this, A, I come on Sundays, B, I go to fellowship group, and C, I will have these amazing deep relationships. And so we can sometimes process it that way or allow our expectations to be set that way. And while that would be our hope that is true for people, what you're saying, Andy, is that community, this sort of relationship within the family of God, isn't formulaic.
No, it's not. And, you know, I think, you know, maybe something to... Well, like here's an example. Just from the text that Clark preached. In verse 23, it says, "Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful." And part of our hope, part of the gospel hope that is ours, that should form the foundation of our community, is the confession that we're part of the family of God. And when you're part of the family of God, that's not a family where there's no friendships. Right? That's not the kind of family Jesus is bringing us into. And so part of the confession of our hope that we're holding fast to, you know, as you press into community and maybe you're still not connecting, there's a gospel hope for you that as you keep pressing in, Jesus is going to give you that. That's part of the grace that Jesus loves to give his children. But it's not a formula. Sometimes you're placed into a fellowship group and, you know, you love each other in Christ, you serve each other, you build each other up, but there's not a deep connection. There's not like there's friendship, but there's not what I've heard termed found friend. Like a friend that you just find and you're like, it's like we were made for each other, you know? And that's that's part of human flourishing, is finding those kind of friends. But the answer is not to give up on Christian community. Keep pressing in and hold on to that confession of gospel hope.
And it may be still worthwhile to commit to that fellowship group and to know that these friends can exist outside of that small community. So
Absolutely.
I know that I have dear friends, both at fellowship and then other Christian friends who are not a part of our community who I prioritize time with because I do share that sort of friendship with them. And I love and am committed to the people in my fellowship group as well.
Absolutely.
So it does not have to be uniquely one or the other. But for newer people especially, I think people who are newer to a church, you hope that those relationships can be found within a group that you're already dedicating some time to. So practically speaking, if you make time for this regular rhythm in your life, that can be an area of expectation that we may need to just examine in ourselves and to be aware of as far as being church leaders, how we communicate that and what sort of expectations we create as we're encouraging people to join fellowship groups or small groups.
Yeah.
Clark, something you mentioned earlier too within this question was that you were challenging us, each of us individually, and then probably also as communities, as groups, to ask the questions of ourselves, to engage in some self-examination, to see if these challenges extended in Hebrews are true of the way we're interacting with each other.
Yeah. Yeah. And those, those really kind of like those questions sit differently depending on your position. Like if you are leading a fellowship group, the question I would want to ask is like, are you creating a space for this to happen? Are you creating a space where people can be met with grace in the midst of their shortcomings? Are you creating a space where people can be encouraged? Is like encouragement the main focus? Or if you're a part of a fellowship group and just an attender, are you like opening yourself up for encouragement? Are you looking for ways to be stirred up by those around you? I think those are like those questions depend on kind of your position and the way that you are relating to that community at large.
Mm-hmm. But there is for every person some proactive element.
Yes.
Of creating this kind of environment.
Yeah. And go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, imagine, sometimes a group can feel, I don't know, I don't want to say we've all been in a group like this, but I have, where, it feels like there's a group leader asking a question and it's just kind of crickets. And there's one like outgoing person that always answers. But like, it's like everybody's really happy when it's like, there's not an agenda. We're eating food. We're just laughing and talking about life. But then the formal group time starts and we open up whatever the questions are and it's just crickets. That is, it's like all the air gets sucked out of the room, and nobody walks away being like, man, I can't wait for next week, right? But imagine a group where everybody proactively, as they think about coming together, they are considering how to stir up the members of their group. Okay, so they're thinking, okay, so tonight I'm going to be meeting, we're coming together, and Lord, what could I say that would really build up and encourage Mike? Yeah, I know Mike has been struggling. He lost his job or whatever it is. And you're just like proactively throughout the week asking the Lord, bringing each of the members of your group before your mind, asking the Lord, what word would bring grace to them this week? What if everybody came doing that? Like, I don't think anybody would leave a group like that, saying to themselves, man, that was a waste of time.
Yeah.
No, they'd leave just built up in Christ.
Yeah. Or if you're in one, to model the idea that you not only give these things, but you also need them.
Yeah.
That's like, I feel like that's where I find the most fear exists with people, is to like say that you do need encouragement in some area when you hear a text that it messed with you a little bit. That is modeling, and like by taking the lead on that, you're actually going to show everybody else in your group that that's okay for them to do too. Yeah. Because everybody else in the group wants to do it. They might just not have like the sense yet to do that, or the courage yet to do that. But we can give courage by modeling that.
Yeah.
And that every question or struggle, big or small, is just welcome.
Yeah.
Okay, last question, final question as we wrap up today's discussion. I think the final conversation that came to mind as I was thinking about listening to this topic, barriers we might encounter, experiences that might influence our perspectives on the family of God, gospel fellowship, gathering regularly with other believers, particularly in our local church family. What if someone either still has these lingering notions that they do have to be a certain way, be a certain thing, present a certain sort of image to come. That's one side of the coin. I think the other side of the coin is that maybe they have, in a church context, shared something, a real struggle in the past or something that was vulnerable, and it has not been received graciously. And so they feel perhaps cautious or guarded stepping into another church community and attempting to do that again. What sort of encouragement would you offer to someone who's wrestling with either side, sort of an insecurity, but it could be caused by either of these things?
The first thing I want to say is I'm sorry that happened. Again, this is like we get a reminder because we need a reminder, and that's for us as members of groups, that's us for leaders of groups. But I want to say that if that happened, that is not your fault. If you had a bad experience by sharing something and not being met with grace, that happens because sometimes those around us forget the beginning part of this passage, that the foundation of community is built on the work of Jesus and not anything that we did. So like when we have conversations and we're not met with grace, that has been forgotten. Like that we are elevating ourselves above others, and we're actually acting like we did something to earn our spot in that community, but really we're all entering in through the same door, which is really just the work of Christ in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that there's always this really difficult tension. On the one hand, as you say, and you earlier as we were talking before we recorded, you mentioned Bonhoeffer. He's got this great book, Life Together, and it's if there's one message that he talks about in the book, it's that the gospel and the gospel alone is what defines our relationship with one another. I think it's Romans 15 where Paul says, welcome one another as Christ has welcomed you. Well, how has Christ welcomed you? He welcomed you in your sin and in your unworthiness. And I mean, Christ is the one who was praying for his crucifiers. Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. I mean, that kind of radical love is so foreign to us. We have this inbuilt kind of sense of needing to earn our place. And then then the gospel and the Christian community comes along where we don't have to earn our place. We are just freely accepted. So on the one hand, I want to say that is the basis of Christian community. And yet there's this really difficult tension on the other hand of if you have been abused in Christian community, if you have been hurt significantly by those who are Christians but have not acted in the way of Christ, it's very understandable to me that you would be cautious. And I think what I would say is, Christ is still inviting you into Christian community, but it is understandable to be cautious, and it's wise even to take your time as you open up again. Sometimes people feel this there are some groups where I've noticed there's this, I put it in air quotes here, this pressure to be real. This is the group where we're just real, but it ends up like everybody just feels pressure to like share all their darkest stuff. But like maybe that's not what your group is for. Maybe some groups that's a great blessing, to do that. But
or maybe not all the time.
Or maybe not
that
all.
doesn't have to be characteristic all the time.
Yeah, so if somebody had a bad experience where they tried to be real and then it was either met with crickets, so it's like you basically have like unclothed yourself and then they just leave you naked.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times that happens because people are just scared They have no idea what to say. Or maybe you just legitimately like were treated really terribly. Like, I think it's okay just to take your time and just prayerfully ask the Lord at what pace, as I get to know and build trust with these people, what level of transparency and openness, you know, I just think there's a level of wisdom to that kind of approach. Yeah. So I'm just trying to bring out that tension, you know, because I do think there's sort of a lack of wisdom if you just walk into any old Christian community full of people you don't know and say, the gospel is the only basis, so I'm just going to lay everything at, you know. I'm not sure that's like the wisest approach necessarily, because it just ignores like the way relationships work. They take time and trust. And
the opposite end of that same exhortation would be, though, if someone does do that, if they come into your community and you either think they're closed or naturally an oversharer, it doesn't matter. You still are challenged to do the same, to stir them up to love and good works, to encourage them, to gather together with them. This, I think, is also a strong theme throughout Life Together that you mentioned. Bonhoeffer says, because the gospel is the only basis, it doesn't really matter if you like each other.
Yeah, that's right.
This is the challenge to you, is to pray for each other, to love one another, to consider each other, to encourage each other. It's not based on whether or not I click with this person. It's based on this is my brother or sister in Christ. That's one thing that I took particularly from that book.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and ironically, you know, I think he just makes such a great point that, you know, the very thing that the obstacles that might keep people out of community, those are the very things in a lot of ways that Bonhoeffer is saying, that's just what Christian community is, right? It's full of obstacles and it's full of imperfect people, and it's just a mess a lot of times. And he has this term, wish dream. If you bring your wish dream of a community, and that's essentially your like overly idealized, like you just imagine like Acts chapter 2 on steroids, like people just perfectly loving each other all the time and always having the right encouraging word, and you found your best friend. Like it's the best imaginable. It's like heaven, you know? And Bonhoeffer is saying, like, if you bring that into a broken, fallen Christian community and you make that the standard upon which you're going to participate, you're going to destroy the community. It has to be the work of Christ, because you're entering into a fellowship of sinners saved by grace, you know.
That is so good.
And in that, still participating, still gathering together regularly, practicing these things, what Bonhoeffer is saying is that regardless of all of the barriers, the obstacles, the clunkiness of it, the dealing with people who you may not really know how to deal with, that it is still a means of grace, because it is on the basis of Jesus' work on our behalf, and because both in Jesus' teaching and that of the apostles, as you mentioned earlier, Andy, there is this promise, this hope that points us to a sort of reconciliation and relationship that we will be able to experience with each other, that in which these desires to be completely known and loved, while we will experience them, hopefully more often than not within the family of God, but still imperfectly, that points us to a time when this full reconciliation and relationship will be restored and we will be able to experience it. Guys, thanks so much. Clark,
thank you.
Andy, thank you for joining me today. I enjoyed our conversation. And, you know, I hope you come back to be guests on the podcast sometime soon.
Yeah.
Me too. It'd be fun.
Give you more.
Pass the test.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll invite me back.
Give you more opportunities to pontificate.
I'm thinking we should have just had Andy preach this sermon.
No.
Thanks for joining us on the Vision for Life podcast. Thanks to Adam Englund for our theme music, and to our producer, Jesse Cowan.